Welcome back. Joining me is Jeremy Barnes, Director of the National Museum and co-author along with Manolo Quezon and my hubby Paulo Alcazaran of the official history of Malacañang Palace. Welcome back, Jeremy. Good to see you again.
Thanks very much, Twink. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, so we've pretty much established that there have been efforts to transfer Malacañang in the past, but what have scuttled these efforts?
Well, Malacañang became a palace by accident after that earthquake demolished the old Palacio Real in Intramuros. And there were at least 3 attempts under the Spanish regime through the 1870s, 1880s, and 1890s to rebuild the old palace. But instead, because of political turmoil and also typhoons, natural disasters, and the lack of funds, all of those attempts came to nothing, and it was easier in the end just to keep fixing Malacañang, to add to it, extend it, and so it just became a palace by default. On into the American regime. And as you said earlier, the Americans had their master plan of kind of fitting in a new presidential residence, sort of like the White House, in proximity to a new civic center. But again, I think many governors general just found it easier just to continue what had been started. And some even really loved the charm of the old sort of Spanish villa type architecture of Malacañang. And then by the time you get to around 1916 onwards, under Governor General Harrison, he basically abandoned the whole Burnham plan. So through the American regime, Malacañang was definitely thought of as the center of power, such that by the time you get to the advent of the Commonwealth in 1935, it was the address to live in. Otherwise, you wouldn't be taken seriously as the head of the government or the primary authority in the country. And so it was President Quezon's ambition really to call that his address. There was a debate just before the Commonwealth whether Malacañang would be the home of the American High Commissioner, which was what the Governor General was transformed into, or the Commonwealth President. But Quezon quickly made it known that if he didn't live in Malacañang, if people didn't see him living in Malacañang, that no one would take him and his the new position of Commonwealth President seriously. And so despite all the master plans, it's been much easier just to continue the tradition of living at Malacañang, which has become so fixed, I think, in our minds as the seat of authority, than to expend precious time, effort, and funds on really building a new address and the whole complex around it.
So it's still the palace by default?
Yes,
almost.
It's still the palace by default. It's the path of least resistance. Okay.
Well, how do you feel about that? I mean, I know you two have been involved in the efforts to, improve the situation. What do you think a doable thing is?
Well, as the presidency has evolved from the sort of as the bureaucracy has grown, as the powers and the scope of the presidency in the media age, in the age of being able to go around the country, the palace has also had to evolve. So from a fairly modest mansion, it has added guest houses. It has added contiguous lands. It added the park across the river. It added, as you mentioned, a new branch in Cebu. We also have the yacht, of course, at the disposal of the president as a kind of floating
I forgot
Malacañang.
to mention that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And for some time, especially since the 70s, I think the palace has really strained to accommodate the functions of the presidency. That was one of the reasons why I think Mrs. Marcos spearheaded the rebuilding of the palace in the late 1970s, both to be able to install centralized air conditioning and seal it off from the heat and the vapors of the Pasig River, but also to really enlarge its rooms and facilities, its communication networks. And so as a historical house and property, Malacañang, I think, really struggles to handle the logistics of the presidency. Security-wise, as you've also said, It's very hard. It's situated right in the middle of a neighborhood, of a residential neighborhood. And I remember President Ramos always, well, on occasion saying that it would be very easy to isolate the palace. If you could block off 4 or 5 intersections, key intersections around Manila, you could basically prevent reinforcements from defending the palace against a sort of an invader or an armed uprising. But at the same time, I appreciate deeply the historical associations the palace has with executive authority and with the traditions of the Republic, and it's very nice to be able to look back in history and see the evolution of our country in context of a single structure. You can walk through it, and you could see history all throughout, and you could watch it unfold and continue to unfold every day with the president.
Well, sure, but that can be preserved as well. I mean, if it were turned into something like a museum, whereby the whole purpose, its entire purpose, would be simply to be able to reflect history from centuries ago, then it would serve its purpose. But it's still, do you think it's necessary for the president to live there or even in close proximity to the palace?
Well, I always felt that just by having Malacañang as your address lends a lot of legitimacy to the president as president. We always
could we not? Actually, could the name actually just be transferred elsewhere as well as the venue or the residence?
Well, I think even if it had another name elsewhere, I think people would still refer to it as Malacañang. It's a very deeply ingrained concept. It's more than a name. It's a concept. It's